Hello, how's it going? It's Matt here. Man, it's been ages since I did the last update. Apologies for that, but the Gallardo build is completely finished. It turned out really good. I won't do a proper reveal of that today, but if you want a bit of a sneak peek as to how it turned out, you can check out my Instagram. I'll put the link in the description. But I have the footage of me doing all of the rest of the assembly of the model, and I'll be releasing those in separate videos over the next weeks or a couple of months. But I'll get them out as soon as I can, so stick around for those. But yeah, today what we're going to do is I'll show you the footage of me assembling the steering rack and fitting that to the car. So let's get started. These are all the separate pieces I've designed already for the steering rack, and they're prepped and ready for assembly. So you can see I've used a bunch of different materials. First thing I'm going to do is make two small brackets, and these two brackets will basically allow the steering rack to be attached to the front subframe of the car, and once I've assembled the steering rack, that is. I'm going to use the sharp pointed ends of toothpicks, kind of like bolts, so I can push the steering rack into the foam core board of the car's subframe, and they will hold it in place. I need to make a couple more for the other bracket, so I'll use my side cutters and snip them off a couple of toothpicks. And then I'll fit them to the other bracket. Now they're basically just pushed like pretty snugly into a couple of holes that I've already made in the bracket, but I'm also going to glue them in place just so I'm sure they're not going to go anywhere or move around. And as usual, I'm using my PVA glue. I'll also put some glue around the edges of the brackets. Basically I find that with small pieces of cardboard like this, if I have to fold them up, the layers of the cardboard want to separate and come apart. So if I put a bit of glue around the edges like this, it just prevents them from doing that. And I'll just do the same to the second bracket, and they'll be ready to be folded up. Now I'm going to make the main body of the steering rack, and I'm going to use two separate pieces of drinking straw, one for each half of the steering rack, because I kind of thought that the bendy part of the straw, it kind of looks a bit like a rubber CV boot on a real steering rack. Kinda. Anyway, I'm using a special two-part plastic glue. The first part is a primer pen, and then the second part is a tube containing the actual glue. I've got my gloves on because I've got this glue on my skin before and it really isn't fun. I'm gluing these small pieces of foam core board into the end of each drinking straw so that I have something to push the steering arms into. Now I'm going to take one of those brackets that I made earlier and fold it up. It folds in two places and I've scored where each fold should go already. I'll just use the edge of my ruler, just make sure the folds are straight and clean, fold it over like that, and make sure the two sides are folded evenly. So yeah, that looks about right. Now I can take one of the drinking straw parts and feed it through the main holes of the bracket. It's a bit of a tight fit, so I need to work it pretty good. Carefully as well, but I wanted a snug fit so that the straw piece can't slide out or move around easily. Let's feed it through and work the bracket all the way down to the end. Basically I just want the flexible part of the drinking straw, the bit that looks like the CV boot, just to stick out the end, and make sure everything's aligned accurately, and then I'll do the same to the other bracket. Fold it up, make sure it's folded evenly, and then slide the drinking straw piece through the holes of the bracket. Make sure the bracket gets worked all the way down to the end, where the flexible bending part of the straw is. Just making sure everything looks properly aligned as I go. Cool, done. Now I'm ready to join the two drinking straw parts together, and it's pretty straightforward actually. I just insert a piece of foam core board into the end of one drinking straw part, and then the other one will just push in nicely as well, joining the two together, just like that. And there I have the main body of the steering rack, almost assembled. Next I'm going to add some detail around the outside of the steering rack. I've cut this detail piece out of some metallic silver card, and I'm just going to wrap it around the steering rack and glue it in place. And it kind of emulates the detail that you see moulded or casted into the outer casing of a real steering rack. So it's pretty easy. I'm just going to glue one edge of this detail piece to the steering rack with super glue. Once that's dried, I'll hold down the edge so that I've just glued so it won't go anywhere. And I'll just start carefully bending the piece around the steering rack, just a little bit at a time. Just carefully bending it around, little bit by bit. Just being careful not to break that little piece. Until it's wrapped all the way around. Cool, done. So all that I need to do now is just add a little bit of extra glue onto the end and glue it down carefully, making sure it's glued flat. The steering arms are made from lengths of bamboo barbecue skewer, but before I fit them, I'll make a hole with a pin, like pre-drilling the hole, so that the larger diameter barbecue skewers don't split the pieces of foam core board that I glued in earlier. So once I've pre-made the hole with the pin, the barbecue skewer steering arm should just push straight in. I'll check the fit, pull it back out, add some glue, and then fit it. Sweet, and then I'll do the same process for the other side. Just pre-drill the hole with a pin, add some glue, and push the steering arm in. So usually you get a bit of excess glue and I can just wipe that out with a Q-tip. Cool, done. What I'm going to do now is add a couple of details to emulate where the hydraulic lines would enter and exit the body of the steering rack on a real steering rack. So I'll just carefully mark the two locations where I want to add the details. Then I'll use the point on my compass to make the two holes. Each detail is simply another little short length of bamboo barbecue skewer, and they simply push into the holes I just made. Actually, they're quite hard to push in, so I use my small pliers instead. And there we have it. Again, those details I just added are just to kind of represent the hydraulic line fittings you'd find on a real car steering rack. So I'm almost done. The second to last thing I'm going to do is paint the steering rack silver. I don't want the CV boot parts to be silver, so I'll cover them with masking tape. Actually, I forgot to assemble the tie rod ends and ball joints, so I'll do that first. These are basically just made from a couple of short bits of colouring in pencil. I've just drilled out the coloured core of the pencil and also drilled a hole in sideways through each part. Now I'm going to glue another piece of barbecue skewer in the end to act as an attachment point for the tie rod or the ball joint to the front knuckle of the suspension. I just insert one piece of barbecue skewer temporarily to act as a stopper, glue the actual piece in that I want to, and then remove the first piece. And I'll just do the same with the other one. Cool, and so there are my two ball joints. Now I don't want them to be blue or wood coloured, so I'm going to brush them quickly with some silver paint. I'll just push them into a small square of foam core board just to hold them upright while I paint. It just means that I can easily paint them and I don't have to worry about trying to hold them. And as usual, my model paint of choice is Tamiya acrylic. Just lays down nice, dries fast, and doesn't cost too much. So yeah, I totally recommend Tamiya paint. And the last thing to do on these is just to add one more small detail, and that's just a circle of black paper. I've added too much glue, so I'll take a bit of that back off, and then I'll just use my tweezers to carefully position the little detail piece on each. And I've just cut these little circles of paper out with a hole punch. And as you can see, I've already taken the steering rack outside and spray painted it silver. All that's left to do now is remove the masking tape from the CV boot areas carefully. And I'm just going to glue on two more small kind of finishing details, if you like, just to make the CV boot areas look a bit tidier and hide the junction where the steering arm meets the steering rack assembly. Just slide on a small black piece of paper and that just makes everything look a bit neater. Nice, and I'll just do the same with the other side, like so. The very last thing to do is to slip on the tie rod ends or ball joints to the steering rack, and it's all done, ready to be fitted to the car. Now actually I forgot to film myself fitting the steering rack to the car, but in this shot here you can see the arm appearing from the front subframe and connecting up to the front upright or knuckle in the suspension, and yeah, it's all done. So yeah, that's the steering rack done and fitted to the car. In the next video, I'm going to be finishing up the front suspension and also adding some other details like the windscreen wipers, just working towards getting the front end finished of the Gallardo, so stick around for that. If you're building something similar yourself, or even if you're just building like a car from a kit or something like that, I'd really love to see what you're building, or if you've got any questions or things that I can help you with on your own build, just let me know. Email me at matt@supercardmodels.com, or you can just DM me on Instagram, etc. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.